Om Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Padakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanangana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratvishe Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Shri Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Nama Eva Kevalam Kalo Nastyeva Gatiranyatha. Welcome everyone again. Welcome Maharaha, Rasana. Nice to see you again. Gopal Nandini. The others of you I already said Haribol too. Welcome everybody. Today we've reached the 8th verse of Srila Raghunatha Dasa Goswami's Manah-Siksa. And from this verse, I'm going to, at least for the next few times, be speaking only on one verse per class. So there'll be a little bit more time to go deep. And that's good. Because in these verses, that is exactly what Raghunatha Das is doing. In the previous 4 verses, he has been guiding us through different types of obstacles, starting with gross material obstacles such as anger, lust, and so on, and then gradually kind of digging down into his own self, him being the example here, and he speaking to his mind. And now in these final verses, we're getting close to the goal, close to where he wants to take us with all these verses. This also means, Haribol Karanam, this also means that we're getting into secret ground, not only sacred, but also secret ground. In these last verses, Raghunatha Das is entering onto the esoteric land of Krishna Bhakti. He's going to tell us some, not exactly secrets, but he's going to speak about things that are generally not disclosed to anybody and everybody. The way in which Srila Prabhupada presented Krishna consciousness was very much based on the idea of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is a phrase that we encounter again and again in Prabhupada's writings. It's almost like when the Muslims speak about the Prophet, they never say just Muhammad. It always has to be peace upon him, or however it is said. Prabhupada hardly ever writes Krishna. It's always Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To emphasize that Krishna is not just some Indian god, but he's actually the God of all gods. And not only that, he's also representing the most, the ultimate person of God. So in the Manah-Siksa, now that we're coming towards the latter verses, Raghunatha Das is going to say much more than this. There's nothing wrong with what I just said. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's very good and excellent. But there's much more that can be said. But it can't be said to everybody. The acharyas very much stress this principle of adhikara, or the principle of eligibility. Everybody is eligible for bhakti. There's no exception there. Everybody is eligible for bhakti. Even animals and plants, some teachers say. But not everybody is eligible for the same kind of bhakti. Within the path of bhakti, there are different levels as well. And why is not everybody eligible for the same thing? Because they want to keep the power to a particular caste or a particular group, to shut out the newcomers and the people they don't like. No, it's not that. It's because not everybody is able to understand everything. And all the information that is there in the books, in the texts, in the songs of the Mahajans, some of it is not only hard for us to understand, some of it is also such that it may make us misunderstand. For example, in describing Radha and Krishna's mutual love, when we read about it, it may sound like the love of any two teenagers. And that may awaken the wrong kinds of reactions in us. Jiva Goswami is very graphic in his description of this, writing to other men, as authors in the pre-modern era generally did. He's saying, if these descriptions awaken male transformations in your body, don't read them. So if the descriptions awaken worldly emotions in us, then we should put them away. Not throw the book away, but put it in the shelf and think, I'll return to that later. Because it really does work like that. Some things that I have experience of that from my own life, and I'm sure many of you have, some things that we can't grasp, that we can't understand in the beginning, after some time, we'll be able to return to them and perhaps understand a little bit more. So some acharyas have been very strict with this. For example, Srila Maharaj, he didn't let his disciples study the more esoteric texts of the Goswamis. Prabhupada, to a degree, was also like this. And this is very good. It's better for us to gradually enter into this hallowed ground. It's better to begin with the basic things and build up an understanding of that, and then gradually add on. When I was in ISKCON as a young brahmachari, we were told that we were not allowed to read anything else than Prabhupada's books. And I hated it. I hated it because I've always been a voracious reader. I love to read, and I've always done that. And I've always liked to read many books at the same time. But I was told then that you're not allowed to do that. You read one book at a time. And when you read all of Prabhupada's books, then read them another time. And then when you finish the second round, then you finish the third time. And then after that, you can start reading other books as well. And I hated it. But I did like I was told, because I knew that these people are telling me this for some reason. And it was very good advice. And afterwards, I realized that this wasn't just something that a temple commander in Finland in the early 90s said. This is what Rupa Goswami himself says. He says that it's bad for bhakti to read many books superficially. To read many books superficially, just like skimming through, okay, I'll read this one now and then that one, and in 1 year I'll finish 50 books, and then I'll finish 100 books the next year, and so on. And that's fun, at least if you like reading. But oftentimes on the path of bhakti, it's better to focus on a few books and read a few books many times to really get a good understanding of them. So in these verses now, when we're getting to the more esoteric part, I'm not going to go as deep as some other commentators have. If you read the commentary of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, for example, he cites many beautiful verses from the Padyavali, from Rupa Goswami's Stavamala, and so on. And Anantadas Babaji, he does the same. He cites beautiful songs and so on. If you feel that you have the eligibility for these texts, then go on and read there. But here I'm going to keep it a little bit more general, just to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. So let us turn to the 8th verse after this introduction. Yatha dushtatvam me davayati shatasya pakripaya. 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 Yatha mahyam premamritamapi dadatyujjalamasau. Yatha mahyam premamritamapi dadatyujjalamasau. Yatha mahyam premamritamapi dadatyujjalamasau. Yatha mahyam premamritamapi dadatyujjalamasau. Yatha Sri Gandharva Bhajana Vidhaye Prerayati Mam. 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 Tatha Goshte Kakva Giridharamihatvam bhajamana. 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 Yatha dushtatvam me shatasya pakripaya. This verse, as perhaps you noticed, it has 3 relative clauses beginning with yatha, and then the last line begins with tatha. So to simplify the translation a little bit, we can understand the 3 first lines as meaning when, and the last one as then. So in the first line he says, Yatha dushtatvam me davayati shatasya vikripaya. When will you take away this dushtatva in me? When will your mercy take away this dushtatva in this shata? The 2 technical terms here. Dushtatva is an abstract noun from dushta. Dushta means like a naughty person or a wicked person. So when will you take away this? When will your mercy take away this wickedness in me? In the previous verses, we've heard about many different kinds of obstacles, as I said, from gross to subtle such. So here he is summing them all up as dushtatva. wickedness, and shatasyapi, in this cheater. I'm a shata, a cheater. This is what makes me do all this wickedness, because I want to hide my real self. When will your mercy take away all of this? Again, he comes back to this cheating. He's been speaking about this in several verses. And it's an important point, of course, otherwise he wouldn't return to it. If we don't come in front of Krishna as we are, Krishna will not recognize us, and we will also not recognize Krishna. We can't cheat Krishna. We can't cheat the Lord and expect not to be cheated ourselves. In his commentary to this, to one of the previous verses, Bhaktivigyana Goswami, an ISKCON sannyasi from Russia, mentions a story from the Ramayana when Ram and Lakshman had gone in search of Sita into the forest, and they came to this area where Sugriva and Hanuman, or the Vanaras, or the monkeys, were hiding out from Sugriva's brother Bali. And they wanted to know, who is this Rama? They've heard that this Rama and his brother Lakshman, they've come here to the forest. So Hanuman went to find out who is this Rama, but he disguised himself. He didn't want to show who he actually was, so he disguised himself. And he met Rama, but even though Hanuman, of course, is Rama's bhakta, life after life, in so many different forms, he loves Rama. He couldn't recognize him. He couldn't recognize that this is my Lord, my Rama. So he was surprised. There's something I can recognize in this person, but can't fully see who he actually is. And then Rama revealed it to him. You are hiding yourself. You're disguising yourself. You'll never be able to understand me if you keep hiding yourself. So the same applies to us as well. As long as we're cheating, as long as we're pretending something different from what I actually am, we'll not be able to recognize the Lord. He may take forms that everybody else will recognize. Everybody else will feel the bliss in that kirtan, or everybody else will be crying in front of that Sri Murti, but we'll be feeling like, yeah, I don't know. One reason might be that we are insincere. We're holding something back. We're hiding ourselves. So when will your mercy blow away all of this nonsense? Yatadushtatva medavayati shatasyapi kripaya yata premamritam mahyam dadatyudvalamasav. When will you give me the nectar of prema, the nectar of brilliant prema? Prema, of course, means love. It's one word for love in Sanskrit. There are many words for love in Sanskrit. Rati, Kama, and so on. Prema is almost always used for divine love, and by our Gaudiya Vaishnava authors, always for divine love. Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami in the Chaitanya Charitamrita defines prema. He says, Atmindriya Pritivansha Tarboli Kama. When we try to please our senses, that's called Kama. Krishnendriya Pritivansha Tarboli Prema. When we try to please Krishna's senses, that's Prema. So love for God, that is Prema. And Rupa Goswami, Raghunatha Dasa Goswami's contemporary and senior teacher in Vrindavan, of course, in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he gives us this classical understanding of prema or the perfect love of God, of our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. That prema can take many different forms, and it also develops in a particular way, starting with just a kind of beginner's faith. I don't really know what this thing is. I don't really have any experience. But I have the faith that if I engage in this, then something good will happen. And then associating with the saints, with the sadhus, engaging in bhajana, in worship, getting rid of the anarthas or unwanted habits, and then gradually deepening our love until it reaches the form of prema, which is pure, completely disinterested love for God. I like very much the example of the gopis. If you've heard me give this example before, then please forgive me, but I just like it so much. Krishna plays his flute in the forest of Vrindavan, and all the gopis of Vrindavan, they hear their name in the flute song. They hear their name. Bhadra, Lalita, Vishakha. And they run. They leave whatever they're doing, nursing their children, cooking, whatever they're doing, they leave everything and they just run into the forest. A crazy way. It even sounds scary. Rasana, imagine you're having a baby and just leaving the baby and running away. It sounds crazy and scary, but that's how totally in love they are with Krishna. And then they come into the forest. And what do they see in the forest? Who do they meet in the forest before meeting Krishna? Saragrahi.
Other gopis.
Yeah, they meet all the other gopis. Imagine that you're in love with somebody and you're running into the forest to meet that person. And then there's all other people there to meet the same person. What a disappointment that would be. And how are the gopis feeling? They're feeling, wow, you're also here. Wow, you also love Krishna. Wonderful. What kind of selfless love is that? No like trace of, what are you doing here? This is me and my Krishna. So this is what prema is like. Krishnendriya pritivancha. The desire to please Krishna's senses, not my own senses, not my own mind. And this kind of love, of course, can take many different forms. Rupa Goswami delineates 5 primary forms of love of God. The Shanta, or quiet or peaceful form of love of the Rishis. Dasya, the love of a servant of his master. Sakya, the love of a friend. Vatsalya, the love of a parent. And then Madhurya or Ujjvala, the love of a lover, or the amorous love, exemplified, of course, by the gopis. Out of these types of love, 4 can be found in Vrindavan. The Shanta Bhava, or the Shanta love, that's not really found in Vrindavan, but the 4 others are found. And out of these 5, the Madhurya or Sringara or the Ujjvala prema is held to be the supreme by Rupa Goswami, because it contains all the other forms of love within it itself. He gives the example of the elements. It's an interesting example in Sankhya philosophy. The elements build on each other. First you have space or akasha, then you get get the other elements one after the other until you get to earth. And earth contains all the qualities of the other elements. In the same way, Rupa Goswami says, Madhurya contains the aspects of all the other types of love. And this is the kind of love that Raghunatha Das is telling his mind to pray for. Premamritam Ujvala, this kind of love, Ujvala Rasa. Rupa Goswami, he wrote the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which deals with all different types of bhakti, all different kinds of love. And then he wrote the sequel to it called the Ujvala Nilamani, or the blazing blue sapphire, which then deals with Madhurya exclusively. So this is where Raghunatha Das is taking us. Ujvala Rasa. He goes on, he says, Yatha I forgot. Yatha Shri Gandharva Bhajana Vidaye Prerayatima. Yatha Shri Gandharva Vidayati Prerayatima. When will you lead me to the worship of Shri Gandharva? That's the third thing. When will you lead me to the worship of Shri Gandharva? Who is Gandharva? Shamananda. Who is Gandharva? Cupid? No? Good guess, but I don't think that's what Raghunatha Das wants us to learn to love, Cupid, or serve Cupid. Rasana, who is Gandharva? Or Gandharvika?
Krishna. Gandharvika Radha. Krishna.
Yes,
Gandharva
Radha.
Krishna.
Yeah, Gandharva or Gandharvika, that means with a long A at the end, that means Radha. So when will you lead me to the worship of Radha? This is something that will happen after all of this shatha, all this cheating has gone away through Krishna's mercy. After this Ujvala Rasa has arisen in us, then when Krishna will I be able to worship Sri Radha, Gandharva or Gandharvika? Srila Maharaj often said that the supreme or supermost aspiration in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, not all of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, but an important part of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, is service of Sri Radha. Service of Sri Radha. Most Vaishnavas think that the highest thing is worship of Bhagavan, God. But in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, we turn this a little bit around. We want to worship the one that God worships. Krishna is devoted to Radha. So as Krishna's bhaktas, we will also be devoted to Radha. We may not even care that much for Krishna. There are some bhaktas who think that Krishna is good, but he's good because Radha loves him. In himself, not so interesting, but interesting because he's the beloved of Radha. So in some ways, you can say that Gaudiya Vaishnavas are Shaktas. They are worshippers of the feminine aspect of the divinity, of the Shakti. The Shaktiman, or the one with the power, Krishna, for some devotees is less important. But this, of course, is a very high kind of worship where we worship the one that Krishna worships. Raghunath Das uses the word Gandharva, perhaps to emphasize that even though Radha may seem like an ordinary village girl, she's the daughter of Vrishabhanu, the chieftain of Varshana. She's not just any girl, but she's still a village girl. And Krishna is a village boy, a cowherd boy. So we might think that this is just another kind of love story, and she's just an ordinary girl. This name, Gandharvika, or Gandharva, it's the same name, just for metrical reasons, shortened here a little bit. This is the Upanishadic name of Radha. Who knows in which Upanishad Radha is called Gandharvika? Shamananda. Yes, Gopala Tapa. In the Gopala Tapani Upanishad, one of the 108 Upanishads, Radha is introduced. But there she's called Gandharvika. Gandharvika means something like the little Gandharva, or the little heavenly singer, female heavenly singer. So it's kind of a majestic name. Gandharva being a kind of obviously superhuman being. So by this name, the Upanishadic text wants to explicitly show us that this is not just an ordinary girl. Gandharva bhajana. So worship of this Gandharvika, worship of this Radha. When will that be possible for me? So Raghunath Das, he answers to these questions in the last line. Tatha goshte kakva giridharamihatvam bhajamana. When, oh my mind, mana, goshte, here in Vrindavan, in the cowherd land, in the cowherd this bucolic Vrindavan, when here you will worship Giridhari. So in this verse, he is exhorting us to worship Krishna in Vrindavan. Not anywhere, but Krishna in Vrindavan. Again, this is something he's been stressing from the beginning, the very first verses, that worship Krishna in Vrindavan, not the majestic Krishna of Vaikuntha, not the majestic Krishna of Dvaraka or even Mathura, but Krishna in Vrindavan, this pastoral, idyllic land where he seems to forget that he's God, playing as an ordinary boy. And this, of course, is the secret of Vrindavan, that there Krishna is in his most intimate, most human-like form, completely full of all majesty, but keeping that majesty hidden, keeping that majesty undercover, so as not to interfere with his love for all the inhabitants of Vrindavan. So worship Krishna here. And worship Krishna also as Giridhara, the one who lifts the hill. This hill, Giri, we're going to hear about in the upcoming verses. In verse 11, Raghunath Das is particularly going to speak about this hill, just as he is particularly in verse 10 going to speak about Radha. It's about this hill Govardhana. He's going to speak more later. But it's interesting that he's combining these two names here, Gandharva and Giridhara. The great Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he liked these two names of Radha and Krishna especially much. The first temple that he founded at Brajapattana in Mayapur, at the place where Chandrasekharacharya had his house, that temple or that ashram he called Chaitanya Math. And of course you can visit this place in Mayapur still today. It's called Akara Mataraja. When we're doing Jayadvani, we often say this. Akara Mataraj Sri Chaitanya Math Ki Jai. The undivided king of all mathas, Chaitanya Math. I offer you my respects. Long live this place, Jai. So in this place, Chaitanya Math, the Sri Murtis installed there are Gandharvika and Giridhari. Guru Gauranga, Gandharvika, Giridhari. Guru Gauranga means the Guru Parampara, and Gauranga, Sri Chaitanya, and then Gandharva and Giridhari. If you haven't visited this place, at least do so online. You'll find pictures of the Sri Murtis. They're very sweet. They're a little bit different in style than the ones that are installed nowadays. They look a little bit different. I think they were installed about 1915 or something like that. So they've been there for a while. And he liked this particular combination of names especially much. Gandharvika and Giridhari. There are other Gandharvika, Giridhari Sri Murtis, of course, in the world. In Sweden at Korsnäs Gård, you'll find Gandharvika and Giridhari. Bhaktisiddhanta liked particularly this combination because it has both the kind of majesty of Gandharvika, this divine maiden, and then Giridhari, the lifter of the hill, which is also kind of majestic. Not anybody can take like Krishna takes. In the Bhagavatam it is said that he lifted Govardhan like a child lifts a mushroom. You can imagine a child lifting up a mushroom. Like, so he lifted the whole hill like that. With his left hand, not even with his right hand. And with one single finger. Thumb, strongest perhaps. This finger, this? No, with the pinky. With the left pinky, he lifted the hill. So very majestic. And at the same time, also very intimate. Because why does he do that? To protect his friends. Why doesn't he just send a thought to Indra that stop this nonsense? Why doesn't he just click his fingers like that and make an end to all of Indra's mischief? No, because he wants to do it in a sweet way. He wants to lift up the hill and stay there under the hill. For how long? Maharha, how long? Yes, Rasana is showing. 7 days. 7 days he's standing there. Why does he take such a long time? Why doesn't he just shout to Indra, stop it? Why does he let Indra go on with all this thunder and everything for 7 days? Doesn't he get hungry and thirsty and tired standing there holding the hill? Because he wants to give a chance to the gopis to see him. Usually they just get a glimpse of him when he comes into the village in the evening or when he leaves in the morning. They have to kind of steal a glimpse of him from their household chores. They, of course, later on, they will meet him in the forest in the night also. But now he's letting them see him all the time for 7 days and nights, standing there, but he can just bathe in his beauty. So this story of Krishna lifting the Govardhan hill, there's so many more things that could be said about that, of course. It's a wonderful mix of Krishna's Aishwarya or lordliness, majesty, and his madhurya or sweetness, his human-like nature. Anantadas Babaji, in his commentary to the Manah-Siksa, he also writes that when Raghunath Das uses this word, Giridhara, it makes him think of the way in which he worships Krishna, because he says, Bhajamana, O mind, worship Giridhara here in Vrindavan. He worshipped Krishna in Vrindavan through a stone. There's a wonderful book by David Haberman. He's a scholar. He's also a Vaishnava of the Pushti Marga Sampradaya. It's called Loving Stones, Making the Impossible Possible in the Worship of Mount Govardhan. So it's a new book that's come out. It's a scholarly book about the worship of Govardhan and how devotees in Vrindavan and elsewhere worship Krishna in the form of these stones from the Govardhan hill, that hill that Krishna lifted up. Usually with the understanding that Krishna is this hill, because in the story, of course, he also takes the form of the hill later on then. Actually before this lifting, when they worship the hill. And Raghunath Das, of course, had been given a stone from Govardhan hill. He was living just next to Govardhan hill by Radhakund. But this stone that he had and that he worshipped as a Svarup or form of Krishna, he had been given by Mahaprabhu himself. Mahaprabhu had been given a small stone from Govardhan by devotees that had visited Vrindavan. They brought back to him a stone from Govardhan and also a garland made from gunja berries, these kind of white, red, and black berries that grow wild in the Vrindavan area. And when you dry them, you can string them into small garlands. He had been given this gift, and afterwards he gave these things to Raghunath Das, and he said, worship Krishna in this form, in this stone form. This is a very strange idea, of course, for people who have grown up outside of the Indian understanding of divinity. That how can you worship a stone? It sounds like some kind of animism or some kind of really primitive religion, like worshipping a tree or worshipping a stone. But there's something deep within it. There's something very deep within it. Krishna can take the form even of a stone. So Raghunath Das, he was worshipping this stone that Mahaprabhu had been keeping. Mahaprabhu himself didn't really worship Krishna through this stone, but he had kept it, and he would touch it to his head, and sometimes he would wet it with his tears. So it had been very much in intimate connection with Mahaprabhu. And this stone, of course, is still there in Vrindavan. It's kept at the Radha Gokulananda temple, and you can see it there. It's a small stone, about this big, a square stone with a thumb mark in the middle, which is said to be the imprint of Mahaprabhu's thumb. So he was worshipping this stone as Krishna. Mahaprabhu gave him instructions for how to worship this stone. You can read these instructions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Very simple instructions that offer water, tulsi manjaris or tulsi flowers, and sweets to this Shila every day. And following this example, many Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they worship Govardhan Shilas to this day. But Anantadas Babaji, in his commentary, he kind of expands this idea to all kinds of image worship in general, or murti seva. Again, we read Rupa Goswami, we see that this is one of the things that he emphasizes the most in bhakti, in sadhana bhakti, bhakti in practice. It's one of the five most important aspects, or five most important practices, worshipping the image of Krishna. Because even if a very advanced devotee can see Krishna everywhere, for most of us, that's too difficult. We need to kind of focus our attention in one place. And there are many, many stories. Again, this Bhakti-Vigyana Goswami, who I mentioned before, in his commentary, he follows Anantadas Babaji very closely in his commentary, without mentioning him a single time, which I didn't think was that nice. But he follows him, but then he kind of expands and gives many good examples, and he tells some stories of Sri Murtis in his commentary, and some of them you've probably heard before, but they're very good stories because they are fun, but they also illustrate the way in which when a bhakta worships Krishna through an image, that image will no longer be just a stone or a statue, but Krishna will take the form of that image and reciprocate the bhakta's love through the image. Some of these stories are told in our canonical scriptures, like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There we hear the story of Shakshi Gopal, or the witness Gopal, an image of Gopal or cowherd Krishna in Vrindavan, who was the witness of the promise of an elderly Brahman to a younger Brahmin. We don't need to tell the whole story, but the elderly Brahman promised something to the younger Brahman in front of the deity. They were visiting Vrindavan on pilgrimage, and they left. And then at home, because of the pressure of his relatives, the elderly Brahman then took back his promise. And when the younger Brahmin wanted to convince him to keep his promise, everybody else said that, who believes this, that he's promised anything like that? There's no witnesses for anything like that. Well, but Gopal was there to witness it. Come on. Who will believe that? So this young Brahmin, he was so simple and so kind of pure-hearted. So he thought, nobody else is going to believe me. I will go back to Vrindavan and ask Krishna to come. So he went back to Vrindavan and he said to Gopal that you need to come with me to South India, to Andhra Pradesh, where I live, because this older Brahman who promised in front of you, he doesn't want to stick to his words. And he was so genuine in his prayers. So Gopal answered to him and he said, well, that's really too bad that he's not keeping his promise, but what can I do? I'm an image. I'm made of stone. I can't walk. And this young Brahmin said, if you're an image out of stone, how can you talk then? If you can talk, then you can walk also. So Gopal said, okay, so I'll come with you, but you'll have to promise that you'll never look back. I'll just follow you and you'll hear the tinkling of my ankle bells. And but don't look back. You'll have to stop once a day to cook rice for me. And but I'll just follow you. So he followed him all the way down to Andhra Pradesh. And just before they reached the village, this younger Brahmin's curiosity became too big, so he looked back, and then Krishna remained in that place. But it was just near to the village, so everybody could come there, and then they realized that he had spoken the truth all the time, and there was a happy ending. So the image can do amazing things like this. And there's actually a continuation of this story of Sakshi Gopal that's not told in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, because this is something that happened after. the events of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The king of Puri had heard about this witness Gopal, Shakshi Gopal, and wanted this deity of Krishna to his own kingdom. So he asked the king of Andhra Pradesh that, please give me Shakshi Gopal. I want to build a really beautiful temple for him in my capital, Cuttack. And I'm going to take really good care of him and worship him super nicely. And the king of Andhra Pradesh said, no, I'm not going to give you that. This is our Lord. So they went to war. And the king of Orissa attacked and conquered and said that now you need to give me Gopal. And the defeated king said, well, how can I give you God? If he wants to go with you, then he will go, but I can't do anything about it. So Shakshi Gopal said, well, okay, I'll come with you, but on one condition. And that is that you, the king of Orissa, I will follow you on foot because I like walking. So I'll follow you on foot, but you'll have to go in front and you'll have to beg in every village that we pass. You'll have to beg for rice. You'll have to pretend that you're an ordinary beggar and then cook that rice for me. So that's how he followed the king of Orissa to Cuttack. And there in Cuttack, the king of Orissa, putting on his royal clothes again, he made a nice temple for him. And his queen came to see this wonderful, moving image. And she wanted to give a gift to the image. She had a beautiful pearl in her nose. So he wanted to give that. It's kind of an unusual gift. We usually don't give things that we've used ourselves, but queens perhaps have the prerogative of doing things that ordinary people don't. So she wanted to give this, but the pujari, the person worshipping Shakshi Gopal said that that's a really nice gift, Maharani. It's very much, thank you. But Gopal doesn't have a hole in his nose. There's no way we can use it. So the queen was disappointed, but she couldn't do anything about it. She went home, and in the night she had a dream where Gopal came to her and said, my pujari doesn't know anything. He doesn't know that Yashoda made a hole in my nose when I was small. So there is a hole, just go back and look. So she went back the next day and told the pujari about the dream, and he looked again and, oh, there is a hole. So she was able to offer the nose pearl to Gopal. So Gopal, he saw her love, just like he had seen the love of the king, and he reciprocated in the same way. There's another nice story about Madan Mohan, one of the three main images of Vrindavan that Krishna Das offers his respect to in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, beginning, middle, and end. Madan Mohan, the image that Advaita Acharya first found and then Sanatana Goswami worshipped on Dvadasha Tila Hill in Vrindavan. Like many other images, this image was moved from Vrindavan during the time of Aurangzeb and the time of unrest in this part of Vrindavan. Because of fear of the Muslims, this image was moved away from Vrindavan, secretly, taking a kind of roundabout way, first to Radhakund, then Kamyavan, then other places, and then finally ending up in Jaipur, in the kingdom of Jai Singh. So Madan Mohan, just like many other of the famous Sri Murtis of Vrindavan, ended up in Jaipur. But Madan Mohan is not in Jaipur anymore, but in another place, a little bit more to the east, a little bit closer to Vrindavan, a small place called Karoli. And Madan Mohan ended up in Karoli because a princess of Jaipur was going to marry a prince in Karoli. the crown prince of Karoli, small city, small kingdom. And she said that, how can I move to Karoli? I'm in love with Madan Mohan here in Jaipur. I'm never going to marry him. And it had all been arranged. The parents had arranged everything. And now there was this upset in the plans. So they decided that, okay, so you can take Madan Mohan with you to Karoli. So Madan Mohan is still there in Karoli. And if you get the chance to visit Karoli, you should. I visited Karoli twice, and last time was just a few years back. Some friends of mine, together with them, we went from Vrindavan, started after midnight, and arrived in Karoli by car just before Mangalarti, the first morning ceremony. And it was a wonderful experience because we got there at like 4 o'clock or 3:30, and we entered the temple as soon as it was opened. And the temple is huge. It's this kind of Rajasthani style Haveli type temple, which looks like a king's or a rich person's house. So it's like a palace. And when we got into the temple, there was just a few people there, like the person who opened, and then maybe some elderly people who were waiting there for the temple to open. Then we got in, me and my friend, and we waited for Mangalarti to begin at perhaps 4:30 or 5. And gradually people started pouring in. Gradually people came in, and more and more. And at the end, just before starting, the whole village was there, the whole village of Karoli. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it seemed like that. It was packed with people. And then they did the Mangalarti, the ringing of the bell, cling, 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 and the Arati, and the song, and everybody was singing in one voice. It was a wonderful experience. So there in Karoli, Madan Mohan has been staying. And in this story, which is a true event from, I think, the 18th century, there was a Muslim man in Karoli, because Karoli is in North India, so there are Muslim communities in all the cities, minorities or majorities in some cases. So this man, he was a devout Muslim. And of course, for a Muslim, worshipping an image of the Lord, that's Buhut Parast. You don't do that. That's haram. That's completely forbidden. Even to think that God is a person, or that God has a son or something like that, that's completely wrong and forbidden. So he was living in the city of Madan Mohan, but he always made a point that to never kind of get involved in any of this paganry. So whenever he had to pass by the temple, he made sure to look down, to not see any of the terrible things going on in there. But of course, you can guess what happened. Once he was walking past, and maybe he heard a sound or something. So by mistake, he looked into the temple, and he saw Madan Mohan. Madan Mohan is the name of Krishna, which means the one that bewilders Madana, bewilders the god of love. So the god of love, of course, bewilders all of us, metaphorically by shooting his arrows, his flower-tipped arrows of the different senses. We see something, we fall in love. Or we hear something, we smell something. But the one that bewilders the god of love, that's Krishna. So this Muslim man, he saw Madan Mohan and he was completely blown away. He couldn't think of anything else. He couldn't hear anything else. And he was so worried because, of course, he'd been always brought up to believe that this is idolatry and this is haram and this is wrong and you're going to hell for this. But he couldn't stop thinking of Madan Mohan. And it became so bad, so he couldn't eat or sleep, and he was wasting away. So one night, when again he couldn't sleep and he couldn't eat or anything, a boy came to him, a very beautiful dark boy, came to him with a silver tray with cups, beautiful silver cups filled with amazing food. And he said that Baba, oh father, you've been fasting and being unwell for such a long time. Have this food and have some rest. But where are you coming from? I'm coming from that Hindu temple, but you should have this food. Well, he was really hungry, and he liked this boy. There was something very charming and innocent about this boy. So he said, "Okay." So he took the tray and he ate all the food, and he felt really good, and he fell asleep. Meanwhile, in the temple, the head priest, the head pujari, noticed that the tray with Mahaprasadam, the tray with food that had been offered to Madan Mohan, was missing. Somebody had stolen the tray, an expensive silver tray. So he was really worried that the king is going to kill me if he finds out that this has happened. Who knows what's going to happen, that I'm in big trouble now. So he was wondering what had been, who could have done it. And he was trying to find out, but there's no leads at all. It seemed like this tray had disappeared into the air. So in the morning, the Muslim man, he woke up and he realized that I still have that tray and it looks really expensive and it looks almost like it's made of silver. So he took it and he thought that I should bring it back to the temple. So the pujari, he had gone to sleep after being worried about this theft. And in a dream, he had a dream again of Madan Mohan, who had told him that don't worry about the tray. I brought it to my bhakta, this Muslim man. He's going to bring it back in the morning. Don't worry, everything is fine. So he ran to the king, who had heard already about the theft, and told him that I just had an amazing dream. Let's see what happens. So the king, the head priest, and some of the servants, they all stood there at the gate in the morning. So the Muslim man, he came there with the tray and he saw them all standing there and he thought, oh no, I'm in big trouble. Somebody has stolen that plate and given it to me, and now I'm going to get all the blame for this. So he thought, my life is over. But anyway, I'll have to give back this tray. And so he came with the tray and he said that I'm sorry, I don't know what happened. One boy brought it to me and I didn't know. And they said, come with us. We know where that boy is. But it was some servant boy. Well, he's not really a servant. He's up there on the altar. So he came there in front of Madan Mohan and he recognized, wow, it was Madan Mohan himself who brought me this tray. And before that, even though he had loved Madan Mohan, he hadn't been allowed to enter the temple because the Hindus thought he's a Muslim. He can't come into the temple. After this, of course, he was welcome in the temple. So there are many stories like this of the amazing thing that Krishna can do for his bhakta. Not only in ancient times, there are plenty of stories like this in our days as well. Sometimes we can think it's imagination, but it's very good imagination in those cases, even if it's just imagination, because it's the imagination of a bhakta that brings him closer to Krishna. And there are plenty of stories also that have been witnessed by others. So Krishna, he can take the form even of a stone, of a statue, of a picture, to reciprocate the love of his bhakta. So these are some of the things I wanted to speak about today, and I've already gone over time. I'm sorry for that. Again, you can if you want to, you can save your questions for the Tattva Viveka Facebook page, but you can also put questions here if you prefer that. So any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I heard a little more detail on that story of the lady who wanted to marry Madan Mohan, and she told her parents that she would only marry him if he built a big temple for Madan Mohan. And so the prince set out to build this wonderful temple, and it was a very beautiful temple. And when she was doing the wedding vows, they were asking her, "Are you going to be faithful to him the rest of your life?" And she was looking at Madan Mohan the whole time of her wedding vows, and she says, "Yes, I will be faithful to him." So it's a cute story. Am I speaking too loud? Do I speak too loud?
No.
Okay.
Thank you for adding the details.
And I also appreciated how you mentioned Prabhupada says Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I never even thought of that. Yeah, he always does say that, and that's very powerful. And I liked the part about how the gopis came, other gopis came, and no one was envious. They were just thinking, "Oh, this is so wonderful. You want to serve Krishna too." So that's a really nice attitude. It was a good class.
Thank you. These are, of course, things that I'm repeating from my Guru Maharaj. But yes, I really like that to think about this with the gopis, because of course this kind of jealousy and this kind of ownership with love is so common for us, and to be able to love without this kind of selfishness, that's such a beautiful idea. Anything else? Okay, thank you all very much again. We'll continue with this series next week again on Friday, and in the meantime, of course, there are all the other wonderful Tattva Viveka lectures every day or every evening here in Finland, and on Sunday, of course, Guru Maharaja's questions and answer sessions. So I hope to see you all on these different wonderful programs. Jai Mission Parparanga Sabarvarajacharya Stottara Shishimad Bhaktivedanta Triparari Goswami Rajla Gurudev Ki Jai. Jai Nitala Pravishta Vishnupad Bhai Charana Aravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj La Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nitala Pravishta Vishnupad Bhakti Rakshakshita Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Nitala Pravishta Vishnupad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj La Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Gaur Kishore Das Babari Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Sachidananda Mohi Thakur Bhakti Vinod Ki Jai. Jai Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Raghunatha Dasa Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Gauri Abhiranta Acharya Srila Bharali Bidibhushan Prabhu Ki Jai. Jai Vishnath Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Srinivas Shamananda Narottam Prabhu Trai Ki Jai. Jai Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Vyasavatar Shri Vrindavan Das Thakur Mahashai Ki Jai. Jai Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath Chod Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Swarup Damodar Rai Ramananda Gaur Parsha Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Prem Sakho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Shri Gaur Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Shri Antardvip Mayapur Simantadvip Madhyadvip Ritudvip Chandudvip Madhyadvip Modradvip Godrumadvip Rudradvipatmaka Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Govardhana Dvadasha Varantmaka Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Dvadasha Upavan Ki Jai. Jai Radha Kunda Shama Kunda Ganga Yamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Jai Purushottam Dham Ki Jai. Jai Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshana ki Jai. Jai Bhakti Vigna Vinashana Karshin Singhadev Bhagavan ki Jai. Jai Bhakta Prabhara Prahlad Maharaj ki Jai. Jai Char Vaishnava Sampradaya ki Jai. Char Vaishnavacharya ki Jai. Char Ram ki Jai. Char Veda ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Raghunatha Dasa Manah-Siksa ki Jai. Akara Mataraj Shri Chaitanya Mat ki Jai. Tadiya Shakha Mat Samo ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Sangha ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Bhuvan Mangal Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Samagata Gaur Bhaktarinda ki Jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hari Bo.
Bhrigupada Prabhu ki jai.